So today, I'm very grateful that we have Deb Roy with us from MIT, where he's a professor of media arts and sciences and also directs the MIT Center for Constructive Communication. He's done a lot of research in human AI systems, particularly in systems that foster dialogue, listening, and ways that build civic muscle. So he's also has a number of positions. Number of accolades. He's a member of several boards and on advisory councils, and really has also been a prominent player on the startup scene. So has been part of founding a couple of companies. And so at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Roy. His talk today is titled "A Better Way to Listen at Scale."
Great. Well, thanks, Norman. Thanks for everyone joining on Zoom, and Norman for allowing me to shift so last minute to Zoom. And Tom, I saw you briefly. Thanks for inviting me to join you for this talk. So maybe just a word about myself, and then I'll share my screen and jump into a presentation. So I spent a little over a year at CMU in 1992-93 in the School of Computer Science. So it's been a while, but it's nice to reconnect with some folks at CMU. And my background, in sort of three chapters, I spent a decade plus in applying AI to modeling and studying language and media. And then I spent about a decade in the world of social media, analyzing patterns of social media and media at scale. And that's really the work that kind of shaped and motivated me and a number of colleagues to think about how to tap into the power of social media, but create something different. So let me jump in, and should be able to see my screen now. So what I will do is start by introducing, so there's two organizations, Center for Constructive Communication, which I'll call C3, and Cortico, which is a nonprofit that is affiliated with C3. And we formed the center a few years ago, and we've made a 1-minute video to explain why we created the center. And I'll start by playing that introductory video.
Technology promised a new era of communication, but set to full blast, always on, everywhere at once. It made public conversation faster, louder, and bigger, but also distorted, noisy, and harsh. It's no wonder that only the loudest voices dominate and divide, and trust is scarce. But what if we could build something new? Design a different future for how we connect by weaving ancient wisdoms about human connection into a new generation of tools built for understanding, not overwhelming, for scaling, but only at the speed of trust. Technologies that turn up the values, not just the volume.
So in social media, if you give anyone the ability to pick up a bullhorn, some do, and they learn how to use it effectively, and it often leads to a pattern of social fragmentation. A lot of the voices that get the most reach are angry, they're extreme points of view, and the same patterns have now leaked into our in-person open mic scenarios. It's very hard with contentious issues to not have the same kind of loudest voices take over pattern. And yet, a guiding belief in our work is that hearing the humanity in others is necessary for democracy to function, for schools, for communities, for workplaces. And that's really what motivates the work that we are doing. So what we have developed is an approach that begins by creating small groups, what we call circles of trust, where there is some underlying connection or shared experience or shared perspective that leads to people having some level of trust in one another that gather. And I'll situate that soon in different contexts. We've worked with dialogue practitioners to develop structured series of prompts, conversation guides that in particular tend to nudge people towards sharing personal stories or personal experiences rather than opinions. These are always facilitated by a human facilitator, and with permission of the participants, they are recorded. So this is really the source of high quality, authentic sharing between people when you have all of these elements come together in the right way. You're kind of stepping into an airlock, if you will, where you can have meaningful, rich conversations. This can happen in person. That's ideal around a recording device. It can happen over Zoom like we are today, except 4 to 6 people is the real sweet spot, so small groups. And we've developed an app to support a lot of the functionality that I'll be describing today. Once you have a number of conversations that happen, they might happen simultaneously or over time, that share conversation prompts, and they're recorded, we've developed a sense-making approach to understand, to reveal the themes that emerge across all these small group conversations. So this really is a way to find the big picture that actually creates the kind of system-wide understanding. We have developed different forms of voice outputs. I'm going to show you an example in a minute of what I mean by that, but they're just very easy to understand ways to then communicate what those connections are across the conversations back to the people who were in them. That creates a way to develop mutual understanding across these small groups. And also to take those same voice outputs and create media outputs which are designed to be public. And that creates a new kind of content that can flow into the public sphere. So I'm going to show you a case study just to bring this to life. We've worked now with hundreds of organizations to bring this this approach into different communities. So this is one of those examples. So the Opportunity Youth Network is a national organization. It's got chapters around the country, and their focus is on doing advocacy work for young people who are out of school and out of work. And we partnered with the Newark chapter of OYN last year, and they were interested in understanding causes of absenteeism. Why are so many kids dropping out of the public schools in Newark? This is a very difficult question to really reveal true insights, because often the reasons are very personal, they're very sensitive. Surveys, focus groups don't tend to do very well. So we worked with this organization, and a very important thing about all of our work is that it's designed, the tools that I'll be showing you soon behind this case study are designed to be put in the hands of non-experts. So it's not our team that goes and does the analysis of the conversations. We're actually handing off the tools to the community. So in this case with OYN, they have a youth fellowship program where they have young people 18 to 21 that have come through the school systems of Newark. So our team trained a group of youth fellows in our approach of forming these conversations, doing the sense making and the media outputs. That set of youth fellows then trained some high schoolers, and those high school leaders then invited peers into these small group conversations. So when we talk about circles of trust, there the trust is really between the high school leaders and their peers. So again, they were trying to lift up stories and experiences that relate to why kids have trouble staying in school, why the absenteeism is so high. So I'm going to show you 2 examples of what came out of this effort. The first voice output is what we call a voice medley. So I'm going to play this in its entirety. It's a 90-second collage of some of the different excerpts of what came up in these small peer-led conversations about absenteeism.
Being the second oldest of my family is more a responsibility on me. I got a little brother and I got a sister. It was like, when do I even have time for school? When do I have time for myself?
I was basically like this kid's mom. And having to be a teenage mother to a kid that is not even yours, I realize all of this shouldn't be happening. I should be in school right now, not picking up my little brother. It's just a lot of things at home. I feel like for us, nobody experiences much loss as we took. Like we got friends we really grew up with, like from the sandbox, like 3 years old, and it's like they gone, and it be like mentally we don't be here. Like I'm here, I'm walking around, I'm pulling this mask, I'm gonna make y'all feel like I'm good, I'm okay, but I'm hurting, like I'm really in pain.
I got locked up, and then I came out the next day, and then I came to school trying to like do everything, but it's like it was too much.
Some teacher don't connect with young African Americans. I think with young people with mental things, y'all need to have people be able to want to hear what you guys say. We hear your voice, what you thinking, how you feeling.
I was full of anger. I did not want to be in school. I was wholeheartedly announcing, I'm going to be a dropout. I'm going to be a dropout. I was going to be a dropout because I didn't feel like I fit in. Like I wasn't learning about life. I wanted to learn like about what my adult life was going to be like. And I graduate. What's next?
So that's one form of voice output, 90-second medley. The content in that medley can all be found in a second form of voice output, which is what we call a conversation map. This is actually some screen captures from a public website that the OYN team published using one of our tools. If you scroll through here, you'll see a mapping of the prevalence of different themes like sense of belonging, mental health, life outside the classroom that occurred across conversations with 170 young people. That's the group last year that participated. If you click into one of these, like sense of belonging, you get sub-themes that are a result of the same sense-making process that our tools enable. So we see sense of belonging as it relates to school climate, misunderstood by teachers, staff. And then we can go and click the explore full insights. And here, for sense of belonging for that theme, we call this a story of stories. There's a narrative form that was written by the high school students that led this effort, and each of these links is connected to a longer excerpt from a conversation, typically as a story or an experience that someone has shared. So these two outputs are complementary. You can think of the voice medley as a kind of a narrative, and it's a narrative you can audit because you can actually trace it back to the full content in this conversation map. And just to kind of complete this case study, this is an image of a training session that on stage are the 4 high school leaders that led this effort last year. And they are training a cohort of teachers that will be placed into schools across Newark as part of the Teach for America program. So the point of OIN is to do advocacy work on behalf of young people out of school and out of work. And this is really an example of this feedback loop where they are actually using the medleys and the conversation map, along with drawing from their own experiences to have a dialogue with these incoming teachers, giving them a really, I think, meaningful and rich window into the lives of some of the kids that they will soon be teaching. So to zoom out, the concept here, I refer to this as a conversation network. And in contrast to a social media network, the topology here is very different. The content that flows through these networks that we are trying to create or help communities create are sourced from these small group conversations. What I've shown here in these different colors are roles that people in the community have opportunities to learn to play to actually create these communication spaces. So you can learn to be a facilitator, design prompts in conversations that make sense for in the right language and the right approach for your community, curate which highlights are lifted up and, for example, shared in a medley, be a sense maker and figure out, kind of discover what themes are actually emergent in a corpus of conversations and map them. Our approach in how to support and scale these skills, here's a little equation. Training programs times AI tools equals civic muscle. So the idea here is that each of these different skills we consider a kind of civic muscle that have value outside of just doing work using our approach. And with the power of large language models, we are in various ways integrating LLMs into our toolkit but always with this kind of design principle in mind, that along with creating spaces for richer listening, we also want to enable people to develop these skills. And so we don't want to replace any of these functions with the AI. We don't want to automate away this role, but instead use technology and training to support people in being able to develop them, even if they don't have any specific expertise to start. So just to give you a couple of examples, and these are just kind of very quick video screen grabs again. Cassandra Overney is one of our PhD students. She's developed a tool called Coalesce. There is a process where you are interviewed. If you are interested in hosting a conversation, the AI bot will first interview to understand the purpose of the conversation, and then it'll draft a first draft of a conversation guide that is based on principles we've found to work in sort of opening up a conversation. And then you can go and edit the draft of the prompts, and then there are other AI models for readability, bias, specificity that kind of will give you feedback if you're changing things that actually throw off flags, and you can get suggestions for how to improve. So this has turned out to be a very useful tool in practice for a number of different conversation projects. A second example, and this is actually something that's been built by the nonprofit Cortico, is a sense-making AI assistant. On the right are different codes in a code book that have codes and definitions, and an LLM analyzes the content of a highlight, that's an excerpt from a conversation, and suggests which codes ought to be applied, and gives the reasoning, but the final decision to actually apply a code and therefore consider a chunk of a conversation as belonging to a theme is up to the human sense maker, not automated by the AI. For a number of reasons, including there is no right or wrong answer for how to interpret a corpus of text. This is a qualitative research task. And so keeping the decision-making in the hands of the person is important. So just to give you a sense of how we've applied this approach in different contexts with partners, Freeport, Maine High School, it's a public school, has it's another example of a youth-led approach where high school students led conversations, surface patterns of what people are experiencing related to some policies in the schools, and they've actually been doing this for several years now to bridge divides. Originally, we came into a pretty low-trust, contentious environment, and the fact that the high school students could control the process really allowed them to work with administrators to make some changes in school policies that has had really positive effects. In Madison, Wisconsin, community conversations, community-led conversations, surface patterns about public safety and policing that were actually used to design interview questions that were used in publicly televised interviews with the final candidates for police chief. You're seeing here a video screen grab from one of those televised interviews. And that was a way to build transparency into the process, again, in a moment when there was a pretty low trust in the decision process, and it helped create a more legitimate search. We've worked with NPR and trained journalists in member stations, about 10 member stations around the country, to host these recorded small group conversations. And then one of the really advantages of this system is that you can pool and find themes across communities. And so NPR then produced a series as part of their Seeking Common Ground on Morning Edition, and broadcast stories that had voice medleys drawing from communities across the country. Final example, this is a fresh one from the summer. We partnered with Frontline, the documentary filmmaker, and had a group of 11 college students who learned the process of going from small groups to media outputs. And they recruited in total 180 peers to have small group conversations about the impact of AI on their lives, on work, creativity, and ethics. And then they used some of our AI tools to make sense of those conversations, and they produced medleys and podcasts that are actually pretty rich with insight for what's going on in their lives as they think about what AI means for their future. So just to give you a little sense of the way the two organizations work, there is research, and I'll show you a few more kind of active research projects in the next few minutes that are happening at MIT in C3. We have a translational research team in C3 that actually can develop field-ready prototype tools and methods, and then work with field partners, and eventually some of the validated concepts move over to Cortico, which is a nonprofit with a product engineering team and a partner support team, where we can actually scale the deployment of this listening approach to communities across the country. So let me play for you just to show you how sort of the path to scale. This is just a 1-minute video that kind of explains the approach to someone who's never heard it before that might consider bringing this approach to listening to their community or their city.
What's the best way to hear what people from across your neighborhood, your school, your workplace really have to say? Town halls and surveys can help, but they can make it hard to hear and be heard. Meet Cortico, a new kind of conversation that helps you surface and understand what might otherwise go unheard. Here's how it works. Step 1, talk. Not as one big group or in isolation, but in small groups for authentic conversations recorded and transcribed. Step 2, understand. Highlight moments to amplify and identify patterns across conversations with AI tools to support, not replace, human insight. Step 3, share. Share what people really have to say, with voice medleys and conversation maps that reveal the big picture. By harnessing the power of small group conversations, Cortico helps everyone across your neighborhood, your school, your workplace, hear and be heard.
So this has helped just simplify and explain the process. And since we started piloting this work in 2019, we've now had over 275 organizations, over 32,000 people who have joined these rich, typically hour and a half long conversations on a variety of kind of civically relevant topics. We do work with local governments actively right now in several cities around the country. A lot of energy and excitement and enthusiasm from young people when they have this combination of being able to build skills, some of these civic muscles, and also actually see the work lead to real impact, such as changing policies in schools or helping train teachers, et cetera. And then we are looking at emerging areas where we're doing experiments and integrations with publishers and media or partners such as Frontline, and looking at this as a way to scale ethnographic research, which is interesting in the political and corporate realms. So just a little bit about this emphasis on all of our conversation guides, and that tool that I showed you, Coalesce, really develops prompts that encourage people to shift away from opinion and instead to share personal experiences. Danny Kessler is a PhD student in our group who did a large-scale study to just look at, as best as we can, kind of match conditions of listening to someone in a civically kind of constructive way, sharing an opinion about a polarizing issue versus sharing a personal experience, that across a number of different indicators of perceived respect, trust, and empathy towards the speaker, we see positive shifts, significant shifts when someone listens to a person's experience versus their opinion. So one of the things that we're focusing, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's happening in the nonprofit now to scale this approach, and then I'll turn my attention to what's happening at the MIT Center in some new areas that we are opening up that are motivated by the work I've shared. So the approach really is focused on organizers that we train and equip to organize these small group conversations. We call them conversation campaigns or conversation projects. And it's up to them to draw in participants from their networks of trust into these small groups. And then by creating the media outputs, they reach some number of people in public and kind of build better understanding of what's going on in the lives of these participants. This year, we project about 100 organizations will use our platform and approach. They will engage about 10,000 people in small group conversations. And we actually don't know how many people are engaging with the outputs, even though some of those are on digital platforms that we've built. Our goal in the next roughly 3 years, 33 months to be precise, we've set a target, is to add an order of magnitude to the recurring number of organizations using our platform, getting us to about 100,000 people within a year in at least one conversation with a engaged kind of interactive audience using digital tools we're building to interact with the outputs. And so I want to just give you a sketch of how we're planning to do this. One is to support organizers to weave conversation networks rather than our organization supporting each partner organization directly. We're finding that some organizations, such as OIN Newark, are part of networks of like-minded and sort of similarly oriented, in this case, advocacy organizations, but there are many different kinds of networks out there. And so we are designing shareable toolkits. So rather than having to design your conversation guide and invitation text and your code book for sense making from scratch, you can actually just copy and paste from someone else's conversation project. And so the technology platform is being designed to make it easy to kind of like view source and HTML. You can just view the conversation toolkit from any media output and start your own conversations. And we're also standardizing the media outputs of medleys and conversation maps to be able to take content from one conversation and cross-pollinate, bring it into another. So that is one area that we're now working on. Second is back to this map of going from organizers to participants to public. In community organizing, there's this concept of a ladder of engagement. So you could see listening to an output as the kind of entry level of engagement in this process. Joining a 1 hour small group recorded conversation is a big step up from just listening to some outputs, as you have done already today. And then organizing a conversation project is actually an extraordinary amount of effort and requires quite a bit of time and kind of expertise. And so we're designing various rungs, if you will, on this ladder so that beyond just listening to an output, you could actually interact and click and add your own voice without having to join a whole conversation. Or once you've participated, you could actually, through an app we're building, learn how to facilitate and volunteer to facilitate in an active conversation. And so there's various different steps in between that we're filling out in our approach to encourage people to move up this ladder and in the process, scale the number of people who are able to bring the approach to their communities. And the other thing that we're doing is refining the media units. You heard a 90-second medley. Turns out if you want a video to spread on TikTok, the first 3 seconds is critical. And so we're working with some media professionals to have new formats with a 3-second cold open and some more context built in. So really just refining the media unit so that it is more likely to spread, and then create calls to action to bring people to the portal, bring people to active projects where they can get more involved. So I want to spotlight some active work now that's happening at MIT at the center. One question is, if we are successful in continuing to scale this approach, how can we maintain the quality of conversations? And that question has motivated a line of work we've been doing for several years. Maggie Hughes is a PhD student in our group. Brandon Roy is a research scientist. They're leading this work to measure, to actually think about how to characterize the quality of a conversation and create interpretable measures. So this is a prototype interface, substantive and mechanical exchanges between speaker turns. How much of a conversation is the facilitator, the Gini coefficient of the distribution of talk time, the entropy, which measures the flow between speakers, are all metrics that we're experimenting with, along with visual interfaces where you can go and actually explore the transcripts and the turn-taking behavior. Each of these rows represents a different conversation in a conversation collection. The idea is to create a set of health indicators and then tune them depending on the style of the dialogue to actually be an indicator of whether the facilitator has held space for a conversation that is considered healthy or the kind of target kind of conversation. And also to have this kind of visual output where the facilitator and the participants, for that matter, can go and reflect on the conversations they've had and use this as a learning tool as well. So we see this both as a way to measure impact, monitor quality, and learn and improve conversations. Another area of research that's happening is this question of positionality in sense making. So I showed briefly an interface where there were codes that could be applied to excerpts from conversations. And the thing about this kind of sense-making process is it's a highly interpretive process, and there is no right answer often for what the interpretation of a corpus of recordings ought to be. And so this is work being led by Hope Schroeder, one of our PhD students. What you're seeing here is a screenshot of a tool that actually Doug Bieferman built called Forage that has a RAG search built in, and you can search through corpus of conversation collections coming from the Cortico platform. So in this example, we're asking for a retrieval of snippets from conversations that are about vaccine access from public Cortico conversations. And then the generative step is to generate themes that come up. And so when you do this search, we get back a LLM generated synthesis of the search results. So you see themes over here, and scrolling on the right side are different excerpts from conversations that are about vaccine access. What Hope has done has added another element to the LLM prompt for when we generate the synthesis of results from the RAG search to actually regenerate the analysis from different points of view. And here she has just asked the LLM, I think this is GPT-5, to take the perspective of a Republican versus a Democrat. And when you then scroll down in the interface, you can see the Democrat interpretation of the same corpus of equitable access and barriers, community outreach and support, and so forth, versus incentives and coercion, barriers to access, mistrust and skepticism. And these two different analyses are linking each of these red rectangles as a link to a specific segment of a conversation. So they're grounded. There's a citation network in the same corpus from two different perspectives. So we're just, in general, very interested in this question of positionality and also creating search tools or sense-making tools that constantly create a reminder for the sense maker of alternative views and alternative interpretations of the same corpus that they're working with. Let me shift gears a little bit. Last segment here. So I've talked a lot about our work on listening and some of the open questions and sort of the research topics around interpretability. We are more recently have shifted some of our interest to building on this approach to listening to work on deliberative processes. And just to kind of go back to my little diagram, if you have a group of people, when you create a citizen assembly or deliberative assembly, there is a period where you have a learning process. You often get experts who come and give some kind of expert background on an issue or that a group is being asked to generate policies about. And then typically there are small group conversations where the approach that I just took you through readily apply. And then typically, at least in the form of deliberative assemblies, we've been learning how to run ourselves. There'll be some generation of possible policy recommendations and everyone votes. Often there's not agreement. Then you go back into small groups, subdivide, converse, come back together, new recommendations, you vote, and eventually, if things work well, there's some kind of convergence, and then you let people know what happened. So that's my cartoon depiction of what we've learned in our collaboration with Democracy Next, which is an NGO from Europe that works on and helps communities with best practices around citizen assemblies. So this diagram, I'm not going to go into detail because I realize I'm actually almost out of time as well, but there's a kind of learn, deliberate, and recommend phases, and this is Democracy Next's kind of recommended process for running a citizen assembly. With Democracy Next, we've been exploring some ways to take our approach to listening as an additional input for what is being experienced by the community as it relates to the issue that an assembly might deliberate on. We've been doing some experiments with AI tools that are integrated into the deliberative process itself, and then using this kind of conversation map and medleys as a way to create public, transparent, kind of understandable and transparent ways to trace what happened during the deliberation, which is one of the areas that we believe can be improved in current assembly processes. A lot of times the public doesn't understand what actually happened during the deliberation. So we've been running, we've run now two multi-day deliberative assemblies with students at MIT. So this is one from earlier this year on sustainability policy changes that could be made for MIT to improve its energy footprint. And lots of things, kind of human factors. We wanted to record people for 3 days straight. How do you keep track of whose mic is whose? So colored mics that are easy easy to keep track of. A lot of questions about why you're going to record everything I say for multiple days in this assembly. So we created data comics to make the data policies more understandable. And then we experimented with various tools that were in between live in-person conversations, which were recorded, where you could go and explore your own conversations. One of the specific tools that Eleanor Poole-Dion created for her master's thesis was to actually infer from these small group conversations, inferred opinion statements, kind of like you might explicitly type into Polis, but that were drawn out of free-running conversation and plotted so that people could reflect on the sort of expressed opinion space that they were exploring. And then at the end of this assembly that we ran in January, we created a conversation map, a kind of output of what happened in the assembly. Last piece of work that I want to show you that is related to this is, again, this is unpublished, just very fresh piece of work in kind of a related topic of bringing an AI-assisted deliberative mechanism that is trying to build civic muscle and human connection. So trying to optimize for these while tapping into the power of LLMs to assist with deliberation. So this is work being led by Suyash Phule, who's another PhD student in C3. This early prototype is called the Habermas game. So the way this works is this is a tool where someone, a policymaker, is trying to come up with a policy here for adjusting the minimum wage. So there's an initial policy that the user has typed in. The federal minimum wage should be raised to $30 an hour. And there are 90 real people from the community. This is actually through a crowdsource service that each person here represented here is a real person that was interviewed a little bit about their own life story and background, and then about their experiences as it relates to the policy topic here, minimum wage. And you can see here that there's based on that interview, we have an AI avatar for each of, I think there's 90 people. And then the LM predicts the level of support each individual would have for this policy statement. And you can see here that the majority of people in this run do not support this recommendation. In this interface, you can then go and explore any of those people's profiles and understand a little bit about who they are, see a AI generated summary of their stance towards the policy, but you can also go and see and listen to excerpts of the actual interview in their original voice of what they've experienced as it relates to this policy. And based on that, the idea is in this tool, the person can go and edit. So they just changed it from $30 to should be raised to $20, and there should also be exemptions for small business and for jobs that typically go to teenagers and aren't full-time. And based on that, you can submit your new draft policy, and the simulation reruns, and you can kind of watch as the predicted opinions drop into place. And here the distribution moves far more towards the positive. There is also, kind of like the original Habermas machine, Mikhail Bakker is one of our collaborators, an AI-generated recommendation that you can also look at. But the idea here is to actually, as a policymaker, generate yourself. Okay, I want to share one last thing, just a couple of minutes, and I'll wrap up here, which is a exciting project that we are part of. That was just announced in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago. So this is a very fresh, new effort. And so the question that prompted this work is, how can we build civic bonds across difference as America next year turns 250, the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution. And certainly this is a moment in America where perhaps there's no more important question that we could be asking. So the American Conversation Project was announced by the National Conference on Citizenship, which is a organization that came into existence right after World War II. And at their annual conference 2 weeks ago, the president of the NCOC announced the American Conversation Project together with a group of launch partners that are shown on this slide. And the idea is to spark thousands of conversations across the country that will be led by braver angels and citizen scholars and a variety of the American Library Association on the Cortico platform. And these conversations will be designed to surface experiences and perspectives from diverse Americans across the country on these questions. What has America meant to you? What challenges must we overcome together? What should the next 250 years look like? And our vision is that we will, through sense making and through a unique visual interface, be able to reveal the themes and the connections and what we believe will turn out to be true, which is that we have far more in common than the media and the social media environment that we are all surrounded in might lead us to believe. I want to end by playing a short final medley. As we've had tens of thousands of people in these small group conversations, what often happens spontaneously at the end of these conversations is people reflect on the conversation itself and the unique and rich experience of having a meaningful conversation, which is a rare and rare opportunity for many of us. And so what you'll hear are just some, in the wild reflections on the conversation itself, which is, for me, a really important way to think about the impact of all this work.
Only when people feel understood can they understand others. I think it's really cool that stories provide opportunities for us to problem solve.
I have learned that a lot of people are coming with so much wisdom, and that when we just create the space, there's a lot of emergence that's really valuable and a lot of compassion that can lead somewhere that's constructive.
We got to respect that the people in the communities know what they want and need, and that they may not have the education and certifications, but they know their community.
We can self-determine and self-organize and say who we are because we are connected and we know what we want.
I think we have to remember that we should stop thinking as individuals and work as teams and collectives, and that we can be way more powerful that way.
In some ways, it makes you feel a little bit less alone and insular, and you feel a bit more engaged with other people's thoughts, and there's not actually a lot of disparity, which is quite comforting.
I am now imagining that we would see network of people that are collaborating with each other, inspiring each other, sharing with each other in order to break the boundaries and reduce inequalities.
Humanity is what's at stake. Hopefully our voices collectively can continue to do that ripple effect.
And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.